Once synonymous with repose and withdrawal, retirees are now reinventing themselves with part time jobs, advisory gigs, and entrepreneurship in their golden years. Across India, the idea of retirement is being recast. Where once it signaled a retreat into stillness and constant phone scroll, it now offers something closer to personal reinvention. Less rocking chair, more startup tables. Once synonymous with repose and withdrawal, retirees are now reinventing themselves with part time jobs, advisory gigs, and entrepreneurship in their golden years. Across India, the idea of retirement is being recast. Where once it signaled a retreat into stillness and constant phone scrolls, it now offers something closer to personal reinvention. Less rocking chair, more startup tables. There are different platforms that are drawing thousands of retirees seeking part time work, board roles, and advisory gigs. Hello, everyone. You are listening to Industry Wired Conversations, your front row seat to founder journeys, leadership insights, and the real stories behind how industries run. Now, the number of older adults who are self employed outweighs that of young adults, suggesting that people of 50 years and older still have a significant role to play in economies around the world, according to a recent GEM special report on senior entrepreneurship. Now, let's welcome Deval Delivala, founder and CEO of WalkAbout Active Agers, to discuss how older adults are redefining purpose, entrepreneurship, and economic contribution through second innings businesses. Hi, Devil. A very warm welcome to our podcast today.
Hi, Priya. Thank you so much for having me on the Industry Wired podcast.
Thank you so much, Deval. It's a pleasure to have you on our podcast today. And to be honest, this is something even I haven't had a discussion about it in recent of my podcast episodes, or for that matter, even with conversing with any of the leaders that I've come across. So I think it's going to be a very interesting discussion today, and we will be gaining a lot of insights from you, Deval. So let's start by telling our listeners about your company, what's about Walk About Active Agers, its specialization, and alongside that, a little bit about you also. They will. How has your journey been till date, and what led you to start up Walkabout Active?
Thanks so much. Yeah, so Walkabout is a community platform for active agers. You won't see me calling them senior citizens because I don't think 55 is senior citizens. I think they're all adults aged above 55. They're pretty much active. Our community platform allows them to have curated experiences both online and offline, through retirement planning, sports, wellness, travel, and learning. So, just some examples, we do like pickleball sessions across cities, we do coffee meetups. We also have a startup accelerator for seniors. We do athlete programs. And then we also do a lot of retirement classes and helping them figure out financial planning as they get closer to retirement. The simplest way to describe what we do is we are a third space, and you would have heard this term in different contexts. But your first space is your home, your second space is work. What happens when you are about to retire, the sort of cusp of retirement at 55, 60, is your second space kind of goes away, right? And your third space is usually where you go to connect and do things that give you energy or make you part of a community. So for people in their 20s and 30s, the third space could be a gym, a co-working space, a club, or it could just be a cool coffee hangout that they keep frequenting, right? But for once you're sort of 55 plus, what happens is you're close to retirement, so your work circle is shrinking. Your kids have grown up if you have children, and so your social circle related to your kids is also shrinking. Kids are also busy as they get teenage, hit the teenager years, or they're going away for studies. And so suddenly you find yourself stuck where there's not many places to go to, right? I'm 42, and I often joke that the music in my gym is too loud. And you can imagine that even for somebody who's in their 60s or 70s, even if they wanted to go to the gym or wanted to go and just have a nice cup of coffee. It just seems very oriented towards younger audiences. And so I think for 55 plus adults, that community space, which is like their third space, doesn't exist. And we are trying to build it. Both virtually and in the real world. A little bit of my journey. So I actually we started Walkabout a little over 2 years ago, but before that, co-founded a company called Get Set Up, which is based in the US, and that was really our testing ground for what we wanted to do with Walkabout. And at Get Set Up, we were doing only mostly online classes. We started just post COVID in India, and we saw that there is this need for there's this whole community of retired 55 plus folks who want to learn new things. They're quite motivated, whether it's cultural, like learning how to do dance and things like that. They're seeking advice on medical, they're seeking advice on legal stuff, or they're just seeking, new friends and like a community. And so we started that, and then that transitioned into, as that online community grew, they were like, hey, can you do offline experiences for us as well? And that's how Walkabout came into being. I have a co-founder, Ashwini Kapila, as well. And my role as the CEO and founder is to kind of, lead the company, get partners involved, try to create these third spaces for this audience. We've just raised a seed round from HDFC Bank and some angel investors. So we're very early days, but we're very excited about the direction that we're taking with building these third spaces.
Pretty fascinating, Deval, and I think very inspiring as well. And I'm really glad to understand how you and the company is contributing to the overall industry with more strategic innovation and a more customer-centric thinking. And I think I'm also, on a personal level, really glad to understand your role in driving that journey forward. And I think your insights definitely give our audience a clear perspective on both the company's mission and, of course, about you and your partner powering that mission from within. Great. With that foundation set in place, they will now. There is a common statement today that ambition is the most important quality for people. However, opponents do not agree with this statement. Whereas, on the other hand, a lot of leaders say that people are more focused on setting goals of their lives. I believe that having a certain aim in life definitely gives a clear pathway. However, sometimes it also becomes a negative development because individuals forget to pay attention to their mental health in order to achieve their dreams. So, why do you think that the idea of ambition has an age limit with the kind of context and a conversation we are having, and it is being so challenged so strongly today?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's multiple reasons for that. And we've been spending some years in this sector, so I can talk about this demographic in particular. I think the generation that's turning 55 to 60 today is fundamentally different from any generation that came before them at this age in India, right? Obviously, if you look to Western countries, you'll see, if you've traveled, to, let's say, the United States, Australia, or Western European countries, you'll see older adults cycling in their 80s and driving themselves to work, right? And I think in India, we say, oh, 60 senior citizen, even the signage and the media and everybody talks of them, they're portrayed in a very different way, right? But I think it's changing. Like, what I like to say is, like, my dad is very different from my grandparents, right? So if I think of my grandmother, who passed away a few years ago, in her late 80s, she spent her sort of 60 onwards years raising us, because she was living in a joint family, visiting temples, largely staying indoors, watching television, doing a lot of activities, but mostly homebound, right? If I look at my dad, he is not as interested. He's still working. He's 72. He's traveled the world. He wears an Apple Watch. His outlook towards experiences is very different, right? He has his walking club. He has his hobbies, and he goes for movies and things like that. He's not really actively looking to be sedentary and stay at home. Or even, is very independent. He drives himself and things like that. That's not a small thing, actually. That's a very big generational shift. And if you think of India, I think this is India's first boomer generation, when you think of it in an economic sense, right? So if you look at somebody who's in their 60s or 70s today, they really came of age in the post-liberalization India, right? And so they built their careers in an economy that was opening up. Their earning power, the exposure to financial products, their comfort with technology is very different from previous generations. So, like my grandmother in her 80s used to use a Nokia stick phone. My dad uses a smartphone, right? He's very comfortable with the people in their 70s today have probably spent a decade or more with smartphones, and especially post COVID, I think they've all gotten so comfortable with OTT platforms, UPI, WhatsApp, you name it, right? The other big change is that the older millennials who are their children or millennials are kind of financially independent, right? So if you think of, and I'm not talking about the whole of India, right? I'm talking about, let's say, the 30 odd million that have access to older people above 55 that have access to smartphones and live in sort of urban, semi-urban areas. Their children are financially independent, which also gives them room, both financial and psychological, to make decisions for themselves. And I think COVID really accelerated a lot of this, right? We say the YOLO mindset, right? Which a lot of us in our 30s and 40s have. We were like, oh, we have to travel. I'm not going to wait till my retirement to have this experience. I think it started shaping how parents are thinking too. So if you see, and I'm sure, if you follow social media, recently there was something about protein intake for parents. There are all these influencers who are making their parents work out in the gym. And there's a reason for that, right? I think after COVID, everybody started feeling that, hey, life is fragile. Let's not postpone, right? And so I see even on our platform and now daily interactions for the last few years with people in their 50s, they want to play pickleball. They want to play badminton. There are women who are coming forward and saying, hey, I want to actually learn about investing in the markets. I've never invested. I've always bought gold. How do I learn about mutual funds? Can you teach me about our most popular class is actually teaching them about the stock market. And so I feel like people are not waiting, saying that, oh, when I'm a certain age, I will do this. They're getting inspired. And so I think the idea that ambition has an age limit is being challenged because people who are crossing 55 today simply not ready to accept that premise, right? And they're not winding down. They're kind of saying, let me look at this next 10, 20 years and see how I can actively reshape what this chapter of my life looks like. We had in India, people now have started living much longer as well. So in your 50s and 60s, you're actually quite fit. And also they're taking fitness more seriously. And everything that you do that contributes towards your physical and mental activity is going to keep you fitter even longer, right? So yeah, I mean, I know it's a little long answer, but I think it's the generation today is like very, very different. I feel the 55 to 60 or 65-year-old is very, very different from even a decade ago. And we see this in our leaders as well, right? If you look at India, a lot of our best leaders are also sort of much older, but you cannot say that they should slow down because they are in their 60s or 70s. So that's, I think, probably what is happening in terms of at least India and how this audience is thinking about ambition and, not wanting to slow down.
Very true, Devil. And I think that's a very important perspective because we are living in a time where we are seeing people reinvent themselves at every stage of life. And of course, the traditional timeline of success is clearly evolving. Today, someone can start a company in their 20s and switch their careers in their 40s or build a personal brand and global influence even after the retirement age. So, and I think, the access to technology or even access to knowledge is kind of changing this entire scenario, and people are no longer defining success purely by age milestones. They are defining it by purpose, fulfillment, impact, and adaptability. Great. Having said that, I came across a recent study, Deval, which says that around 64% of seniors, like age 50 and above, want to continue working post retirement for financial independence, mental peace, and to maintain a healthy lifestyle. And the debate over increasing the retirement age from the norm of 60 years has been an ongoing one for the past few years. And the term independent seniors has also become a new demography due to the rise of nuclear families and increased life expectancy and children living across geographies. So, what is driving the rise of the second innings entrepreneurship among older adults?
Yeah, it's a great question and really good insight. And I think some of it I already addressed, so I won't repeat. But I think, if I had to summarize it in 3 points, I think it's purpose, capability, and economic independence. So, first is purpose, right? I think we traditionally, it was like you study till you're 20, 22, you start working, you retire at 60. So you've had a like 30, 40-year career. And then it's like you retire, right? You're like, okay, now I'm going to take time off. I'm going to travel. Kids have grown up. I'm going to now delve into hobbies and things like that, right? But now things are more fluid. Like you rightly said, I think access to technology has changed it. But I also think after spending 30 years in a career, and maybe it could be a typical office job, the question is not like, hey, I want to put my feet up. And for some, maybe it is, and that's not a bad thing. But for many, it's not enough. They want to build something, they want to feel useful. And entrepreneurship, in whatever form, a second innings or a flexi job or a gig work, gives them that sense of purpose in a way that almost nothing else can, right? Because you remember, work is also a second space, right? Like I discuss, third space, but your home is your first space, work is your second space. When you go to work every day, people come and ask you, right? Hi, Priya, how was your day? Priya, can you help me with this? That makes you feel wanted, important. It gives you a purpose. We kind of diminish that role of what mental health benefits that the workplace brings. And the work doesn't have to be an office, it can be anything. But I think this feeling of feeling useful, you'll see grandparents or parents usually complain कि in Hindi they say हमें कोई पूछता नहीं है, or like nobody is asking us questions, or you all don't care for our opinion anymore, right? But what work gives you is basically, or entrepreneurship or setting something up on your own, even in your 60s, what that gives you is someone will ask you for your opinion. It makes you feel relevant, and everybody wants to feel relevant. So I think its purpose is the first one. I think second is capability, right? I think we sometimes forget that people in their 60s are not inexperienced people. Yes, they may not know how to make a reel, or they may not know how to, let's say, market their products on Facebook, or know how to set up account on Swiggy to sell their food product, right? But they've spent 20 to 30 years in, whether it's supply chain, customer relationships, operational disciplines, and things like that, right? Which actually no business school can teach, right? They have networks, they have domain knowledge, they have insight. And so what they've lacked is a platform that says, hey, you have this skill. Maybe it doesn't fit in today's, let's say, digital environment in some way. Let me help you figure it out, take you seriously, and help you launch your venture. And I'll give you, like, like we have somebody on our team. She spent close to 20, 25 years at ADP in one particular role, and now she's a community manager with us. She's 60, and she's doing phenomenally well, but she's applying all the things that she has learned into this role, right? So I think that capability is there, is just helping them find that bridge that, hey, you have the skill set, how can I help you do this, right? And when I talk about our entrepreneurship program or the classes that we run, it usually helps them with that, right? You could be, we have, because ours is a peer-to-peer platform, everybody who teaches or provides a service on our platform is also 55 and above. So I'll give you an example. We had this yoga teacher, and she was doing yoga classes on our platform. She applied to be a yoga teacher, and she's a great yoga teacher, but she's never used a computer in her life. And it took us some time. It took us a week and a half to teach her, how to use Zoom and how to conduct online classes. And it's been 3 years, and she has a full class every day. Similarly, we have a singing teacher who's, sung at Sydney Opera House, and she sung at the Rashtrapati Bhavan and things like that. She's very, very good classical singer, but she's never used an iPad or, any online forms to teach before in her life. We taught her, and now I think she's clocked over 10,000 hours of teaching singing on our platform. And she's creating economic value, right? Because we're paying her for those classes. And so, but more importantly, she's getting validation, right? She's finding an audience for her craft. And so I think that capability is really, we need to see it as how can they have the capability, how do we bridge that? And the third, like you rightly said, right, is economic independence as well, right? I think this generation obviously has savings, they have pensions, they have financial security, a lot of financial planning and things. They're not starting business because they they because they need the money in some ways, but I think it's also because they have that passion and purpose. Remember, like, you see a lot of bakers and like the 30s and 40s today, right? You see a lot of people running coffee shops or running a pottery studio and things like that, and it came out of passion, and their parents allowed them to do it. Remember, people in their 60s and 70s, they grew up in a very different India, right? I don't think they had the money to even pursue a hobby back then. So now that they're retired and they're like, hey, I always wanted to be a dance teacher. Can I teach dance now because I'm a retired person? It allows them to have that economic independence, but in a way that wasn't allowed, or their circumstances didn't allow that when they were in their 20s and 30s. So we have this teacher on our platform. She was, I think, I forget which PSU bank, but she's a retired banker. She picked up Bharatnatyam after she retired, and now she's 76 or 77, and she teaches Bharatnatyam on our platform. But she has classes every day, and it's not just that dancing gives her joy, but it's also economic independence, right? That money allows her to spend on travel or on things that she wants to buy for herself, right? Without really worrying about pension and things like that. So I think, yeah, it comes down to purpose, finding your purpose. I think it gives you, they have the capability. We just need to find the bridge. And I think it gives you economic independence. And all of these, remember, at the end of the day, contribute to your mental health, right? Ultimately, it's about not just living longer, but it's also like living better, right? And I think this allows you to live better because it's giving you that sense of purpose and relevance back in your life.
That was very well put out, Deval, and I think it really highlights how entrepreneurship and economic independence is no longer confined to a particular age bracket. And it's also interesting that many older entrepreneurs are entering the startup ecosystem with decades of industry knowledge or professional networks already in place. So it gives them a very different approach compared to first-time founders in their 20s. And again, we are witnessing a shift in how success and career longevity are being defined. For many, retirement is no longer viewed as an endpoint, but more as an opportunity to build something more meaningful and flexible and purpose driven. And I think it's this mindset shift. I think it's creating a much more diverse entrepreneurial ecosystem with different leadership styles, risk appetites, and business philosophies coming into play. And like you said, I think that a lot of things are already in place. It's just that we need to establish a bridge for them to innovate and come forward and do something probably they haven't done in a while in their entire lives. So with that being said, one follow-up question, I think probably the last question for today's discussion, is that what would you say to someone who feels they have missed their chance to pursue something meaningful?
I think it's, and like I'm 42 now. I've never believed in deadlines myself. I feel like it's never, they say that, oh, 10 years ago, things were so much better. There was no AI, like all of that. I actually think the best time is now. And I think that technological advancements and all the tools that we have and things like that, it's actually made it a lot easier, right? You don't have to invest a lot to actually start something. There's a lot of resources online. Obviously, we have a lot of resources on our platform. There is YouTube, which is like free. So I think I always say this, if you're sort of a curious, curious mind that wants to explore something new, this is actually a really good time to start. And as a 55 or a 60-year-old, you have experience that no 25-year-old has, and that shouldn't be stopping you in the first place. You have a network that took decades to build, which again, it's your competitive advantage. You have the financial stability to take a risk, right? You probably have a home, you don't have to pay rent, you don't have young children, you have fewer expenses. And so, there's no downside of you trying something different. You have the patience and perspective also, right? Because you have lived through many economic cycles. Remember that, it's not the first time we are going through market corrections and things, personal challenges and things. They've already done all these things, right? So these are not weaknesses. They actually, I would view them as unfair advantages. And these advantages that actually help them start. And remember, I'm not saying that you need to start like a company tomorrow, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it could be anything. It could be you wanting to join an NGO and teach kids. It could be you wanting to pursue your hobby for baking and just set up your own Insta store where you're selling like because you're really good at it. It could be many different things. It doesn't have to be, typical company or a startup in the literal sense, right? I'll just give you some examples. Like we have someone on our platform who is like a Geeta. She was a DD TV news reporter for a really long time, and then after retirement, she basically turned her passion for baking into a business, right? And she joined our last accelerator, startup accelerator, and we basically helped her figure out how to set up Instagram, how to do sales online, how to set up Razor Pay, and things like that. We had somebody on our platform who was a kindergarten teacher, and she's actually spent a decade making pottery at home, but never selling it. And, she won our last accelerator, and we basically now she exhibits in India and all over the world. Late, I think she's 63, 64 now. But just turning even a passion into or a hobby into a small business, it can bring a lot of new things. It can bring connections, it can bring reduce social isolation, it can give you your purpose back, it can give you financial independence back. So, yeah, I would say that there is the only deadline that matters is the one kind of you set for yourself. I think there are a lot of resources now. Obviously, Walkabout, we've tried to put everything together under a Walkabout Startup Accelerator program. But I think somebody who's 55, 60, they actually have a leg up. And just so I mean, Niti Aayog has actually put this number out, but it almost estimates that 4.5 crore Indians above 60 are economically capable of participating in meaningful work. And that's not really a retirement problem, right? It's actually an untapped economic engine. And we need to really give them platforms, give them tools that allow for that. There are so many startup accelerators for young people, and rightly so in India, incubation cells and all of that in different universities. I think instead of constantly framing our conversations around senior citizens, around people in their 60s as how do we take care of them, I think the right question to ask is how do we create the conditions for them to contribute? And there are two very different questions. I mean, we need both, right? But I think the care bit can come a little later, like in their 70s or as they're physically and emotionally starting to get weaker. But I think when you're prime, when you're 50, 55, I think we need to stop viewing that as old age and really create the conditions for them to contribute. And even with family, right? I think sometimes children worry, right? They're like, oh, why don't you rest? You've done your bit. But actually, that's while it's coming from a place of love, that's actually paralyzing, right? People say, Arey, why do you want to take a risk at this age? Or, why work so hard? We worked so hard before, or whatever it is, right? But I think if you're someone in your 60s and you have the same, you have that ambition, I think it's important to just because it helps you find that purpose, and that helps. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You find the purpose, you find the connections, you find the economic independence, you feel relevant, you feel good about yourself, your mental health is better, your physical health is better, you're going to live a much fulfilled life as you head towards 70s and 80s. So yeah, that would be my sort of final take on that.
I agree with you, Deval, that Retirement should no longer, I mean, it's not about slowing down. It should be more about showing up and on their own terms. And it is time that we stop thinking about this demographic as a liability and instead recognize them as assets and work across sectors to help break down barriers to unleashing their potential. And I also believe that it is imperative for governments to create innovative and interagency frameworks to catalyze strategic thinking and prioritize new policy and create a space to advance this movement. And on that inspiring note, we come to the end of this incredibly insightful conversation. Thank you so much, Deval, for joining us today and not just sharing your personal and professional expertise, but also your experiences and perspectives and valuable lessons that you have learned along the way. And I think the entire discussion offered a very meaningful impact that it's important that, we need to have a vision, adaptability, and the willingness to keep evolving. Thank you for your insights, Deval. It was lovely chatting with you.
Thanks, Priya. It was great. And thanks for having this conversation. I think a lot more conversations like this are needed to move the needle, but excited to share our insights here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Deval. To everyone tuning in, we hope this conversation gave you fresh insights and perhaps even a different way of looking at your own journey. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon with more conversations featuring leaders and change makers shaping the future across industries. Until then, stay curious and stay inspired and keep building towards what next. Thank you so much.